Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today on Central Booking, I'm talking cozies, crime, and cheese with Connecticut's own Korina Moss. It's been a good year for the author. Korina just won the Agatha Award for Best First Novel for Cheddar Off Dead, the inaugural title in her popular cheese shop mysteries. She also released the series' third entry, Curds of Prey, in which Cheesemonger Willa Bauer finds herself involved in a messy murder investigation that threatens both her personal happiness and professional livelihood. Not only is her boyfriend a suspect in the death of socialite Summer Harrington's fiancé, but the bride-to-be's powerful mother and the town's mayor are putting on the pressure, albeit to different ends. Fortunately, Willa has her Curds Whey co-workers to help save her from the chopping block and serve up some justice. Before transitioning to novels, Korina had short stories published in the anthologies Crime Travel and Death by Cupcake. She made her full-length debut with last year's Cheddar Off Dead, which was followed by Gone for Gouda. Curds of Prey continues that tradition of cheesy goodness. Jen at Novels Alive gave the story 4.5 stars, noting, "I found Curds of Prey to be the strongest book in the series to this point. I was sucked into the story and loved the ride. I highly recommend the series to fans of culinary cozy mysteries." Now, prepare to be made a believer, if you're not already, because Korina Moss is not your average storyteller. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Central Booking. I am delighted to be in conversation today with Connecticut's own Agatha Award-nominated author Korina Moss, who writes the Cheese Shop Mysteries, the third of which, Curds of Prey, is available right now. Welcome to the show, Korina.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. And, I have to say, and I'm sure you've heard this from everybody who's read your books, and I emailed it to you the other day, but these things should come with a warning, like, do not read when hungry, because oh my gosh, like, I'm a hungry person as it is, but I've been devouring cheese all week on account of reading your book. So people, be forewarned. But if you're looking for a reason to indulge, this is certainly it. But I am thrilled to have you here. Birds of Prey is a great title. I love the puns. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just giving us the setup for this book, because your protagonist, Willa Bauer, she sort of offered the business opportunity of a lifetime, which is to present a cheese bar at the wedding shower for Summer Harrington, who is really a young socialite. And so it goes from a really great moment really quickly to Willa discovering a body dead with a pitchfork in it. So give us this scenario and then tell us what the implications of this discovery are for her.
Yes, so just as you said, it is the opportunity, of a lifetime. The Harrington family, Olivia and her two grown daughters, are very influential and wealthy. They own all things Sonoma magazine. And so this is Willa's chance her cheese shop is only a year old or so. So this is her chance to really shine. And yes, she finds the fiance dead. This is my third book. This is Willa's third found dead well, more than that, but the third found dead body. And so she's learned a thing or two, and this time she's not going to get involved, but she's pulled in by someone she doesn't feel like she can say no to. And so the problem there is that the suspects she ends up coming up with come from two very powerful families, the Harringtons themselves, and then the mayor and her nephew. And so she has to walk a fine line between suspecting, trying to get information, and knowing, who to trust. And so the stakes are really high for her in this one.
Yeah, they really are. And I'm going to ask you to expand on that for a minute, if you wouldn't mind. Because as you said, she all of a sudden is in orbit with the Harringtons, who are very powerful and influential, and the mayor as well. And so there's sort of conflicts both personally and professionally, because these are people in the community that she really needs to rely on to help grow her business. And all of a sudden, she sort of has to look at them as potential suspects. So can you talk about the personal and professional implications of these relationships that she finds herself in?
Sure. She absolutely. The mayor, of course, it was the one who introduced Willa, and is the whole reason that she's there, because it's the mayor's nephew who was the fiance. So actually, it's the mayor and her son who are end up being suspects. So it's her nephew who was killed. That fiance, that's the tie there. And so Willa, she wants to be in good with, of course, the mayor, but then with the Harringtons, like you said, Olivia ends up being very influential and just, getting her name in all things Sonoma magazine, and then not pissing anybody off, basically. So between the two of them, um, if she tells one that she suspects the other, then she also, as the book goes on, they're more entangled than she realizes. And so she is not sure who to trust as far as even, who to tell, much less who to suspect or who to defend.
Right. It's a very fine line, and I felt myself being very, sympathetic to Willa because
Uh,
it's a certainly a delicate balance. And I wanted to ask you too, because not only is this a whodunit, obviously, but there's plenty of romantic intrigue for people who enjoy that. So I'm wondering if you can give us, the setup of relationship dynamics here. What is Willa's background, and how does that play into this book, and the stakes for her, which are certainly very high, personally, in addition to professionally, as we already discussed.
right. Yeah. So um this, as I said, this is the third book. And so Willa she has some trust issues from a very old relationship where her fiance and her best friend ended up getting together behind her back. And she also has some personal heartaches at home from her brother's death. And so she treads carefully. And so Roman, who is in this book, he is the meadery owner in town. She and him have been having a flirty friendship, and they finally, in book 2, I don't think it's, hopefully not too much of a spoiler, that they start to think that maybe there's going to be more. So in book 3, we kind of have jumped a few months from book 2, and they're starting to casually date, and it now might be more. And so now she's really considering that, and kind of has convinced herself that this is what she's going to do. Well, then because of the Harringtons, she finds out that he also knows them in quite an intimate way, and this really changes her idea of, who he is and whether she can trust him. And yet she has known him for a year and been quite close with him, and so she still feels a deep friendship with him. And he's suspected in this murder for various reasons, because he had an argument with the fiance. And so she knows he's not a killer. I mean, he might be a lot of things, but he's not a murderer. So she also decides to kind of get involved to clear his name. And yet, while doing that, she's also stumbling over things, because it's difficult for her to, with his history with the Harringtons, to know how he's involved, and what if they're close to him, or if they're setting him up, or she's not sure how everybody's involved, basically. And so she's just that's another thing. And also her heart is involved. And so as she's trying to solve this mystery, she's also trying to figure out, should I give this guy another chance? Does this make him a bad guy altogether? Or was he just, younger? Did he not know what he was doing? Am I different? Every woman wants to feel that way. So she has a lot, personally on the line as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's very complicated, but fortunately for her, she also has some really good friends and coworkers. And so at Curds and Whey, she has Archie, and she has Mrs. Schultz, and they actually sort of formalize their amateurish investigative group in this book, and they name themselves Team Cheese, which I love. And I'm hoping, maybe there will be some merchandise opportunities, hats, t-shirts, because I would totally be wearing those. But I'm wondering if you can tell us, what is it that Archie and Mrs. Schultz and even her friend Baz, what do they bring to the proverbial table, and why is it important to sort of have that intimate ensemble group to support Willa as protagonist?
Yeah, I think having a group, for me, it's fun to write. For me, when I read books or watch mysteries on television, those series or a movie, I like when it's the group and when they do it together. I really like Agatha Raisin. In the book, it's not it is sort of a group. It gets to be like that in this series on the British mystery series. It is more of a group, and I just love that. And I kind of that was in my mind as I was going along with this series, how I continued to want it to be more of a group. And I think because they really it's easy to see how each other is, and they're not only their relationships, but it brings out their own personalities with them together. And also in Shut Her Off Dead in the first book, Willa is brand new to Yarrow Glen, and so she knows no one. And so this group solidifies very quickly, and they're very loyal to each other, and she can really trust them, and they can really trust her. And so this is the only time that like we get a lot of banter and stuff is with her or Mrs. Schultz or Archie, and like I said, their personalities really shine. And so I that's why I kind of wanted it to be more than just Willa on her own, and I keep trying to bring the group in with each more and more with each book as they get closer together.
Sure, I love the group. I mean, I love Willa, but it's great to have that ensemble to come back to. And I think, like you said too, it sort of opens up the door to future storytelling because you can go in so many different directions and involve those characters in different ways. Not ways, but
Yeah,
anyway, if I
yeah.
could ask you, I just
No,
can't get them.
no, it's true. I purposely made them very different people, but kind of with the same issue of they're all kind of blossoming in their own ways. In their Mrs. Schultz, she's smack dab in her 60s. She's a retired high school drama teacher and widowed just a few years back. Her retirement wasn't what she envisioned it to be, so that's why she ended up working at Curds Whey. And she but she is, she had to get out of her comfort zone and, kind of find her footing. And in this case, in this book, kind of starting a relationship, which she never thought she would do again. She was very happily married for a long time. And then there's Archie, who's 20 years old now and kind of a, innocent for his age. He's a lot like my own son. And he, also kind of trying to figure out his own life. He's decided he does have a passion for cheese, and he's kind of the cheesemonger in training and growing too. And then there's Baz, who is her best friend and next door neighbor, and he also he has a large family, and they're all in home construction, own their own business, and he kind of pulled out from the family and is a handyman, kind of the black sheep of his own family. And so they're all in their way, of course, plus with Willa trying to come into their own and figure out what's going on, but they're all different ages and at different stages in life. And I wanted to portray that and show that no matter what stage you are in life, sometimes you're thrown into a new situation that you're not sure of and that you're trying to make the most of. And these things can all happen to you. And it's not just people who are just starting out, it's whoever.
Right. And I really appreciated that because you get so much life perspective. And I guess, the nice thing when it comes to a crime and trying to solve it is you then have, sort of three different generational viewpoints who have some kind of different input to bring to the
Yes.
story, which is outstanding. And I wanted to ask you too, we talked about all this conflict that Willa potentially has with the mayor, with the Harringtons, even, with her boyfriend. But as an amateur sleuth, there's sort of that inherent conflict with local law enforcement too. So I'm wondering, if you can talk about that and how her relationship with the police is progressing a bit now that you're at book 3 versus book 1, because there is a bit of an evolution to that relationship as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Shut Her Off Dead, she was, like I said, she was brand new to the town, so she had no idea about the police. Detective Heath is the main detective, and Shep is his kind of his assistant officer. And Detective Heath was fairly new to Yarrow Glen too. So nobody knew too much about him. So she didn't know if she could really trust him. And when she felt like, okay, he's above board, she felt like, well, he's almost 2 by the book, and this isn't going to happen fast enough, and I better figure this out on my own, because my life and my shop is on the line. And so she didn't know how to be an amateur sleuth, and so in the first book she does it poorly, and she kind of asks questions that are sometimes a little obvious, and but that was purposeful in my head, because I thought, well, who knows how to do that? I mean, maybe I would, because I've been reading cozy mysteries forever. But the average person really wouldn't know. So she got herself in a lot of trouble in the first book. And the second book, she did trust the detective more, Detective Heath, and also, of course, he's a smoldering detective. Of course he is. And so she's got this little bit of chemistry with him, but she doesn't really know that he has it back, because every time she thinks maybe he does, something happens with him, or he says something and she's like, okay, and so she's got that there a little bit, but she's also trying to respect him and his who he is at this point. But in the second book, Gone for Gouda, Archie is the suspect, and she can't have that. Everybody loves Archie, and she feels very protective of Archie, and so she just goes all in with that, and she's a little bit better in the second one as far as how she goes about it, and she does include her friends, and everybody's much more involved in the second book. And so that's how that one goes. Now in the third one, like I said, she has decided, okay, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to get involved. I'm going to let the police handle it. And then she is asked to get involved, and because now she has a little bit of reputation for solving these crimes, and she the person who wants her to get involved doesn't really trust the police to go after the Harringtons because they are so influential. And so as she's trying to figure out how to do that without, like we said before, bothering, making the Harringtons be her enemy, she's also doesn't want Detective Heath to, be mad at her. She's always promising him, I'll let you do it, I'll let you do it. And yet she has to kind of do it on her own. And in her own head, I think she's thinking, well, I'm helping out and I'm going to give him information this time. Because in the first one, it was very separate. She was keeping her information. He was keeping his. He never, of course, shares information with her because she's a citizen. And so, but this time she's like, okay, so if I get information, I'll give it to him and then I'll help him out. And of course, helping him out is just disastrous, as it always is. So she is trying. And in the next book, that actually comes to a head. But in the fifth book, which I've started now, they actually have to work together because it's outside his district. And so they finally have to come together and work. But that's another way that she has to balance this whole investigation between the two powerful families, Detective Heath, the romance. It all comes together for poor Willa.
And she can't let him too close to the cheese. It would probably melt. I mean, all kinds of problems.
Yes. And I didn't mean to write him that way either. He was not, the trope of the detective being the love interest. I was like really anti that, because I was just like, oh, you see that all the time. I'm not going to do that. And then the more I'm writing him, he was just like this, the strong, silent, dark, steamy type. And I was just like, of course she's going to think he's hot, but that we don't have to, nothing has to happen. Nothing has to happen, Willa. We'll see.
There you go. That's when the cheese becomes the cheese dip.
That's right.
But But let me ask you, I want to ask you about Yarrow Glen as well, which is in Sonoma Valley. So it's sort of an intimate, small, interconnected community. And you were familiar, with small town Connecticut yourself. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you can tell me what appeals to you about sort of that tight-knit community, and how are you able to draw on your own, experiences in a small town for creative inspiration?
Yeah, I love a small town, and like you said, I live in the quiet corner of Connecticut, very small town. And I think for a cozy mystery especially, it's really important to either have a small town, or if you have a big city, of course, a neighborhood, because that's why readers come back. That's why I always came back. Like I said, I've been a cozy mystery reader, well, a mystery reader forever, and then cozy mystery reader before they were even called cozies. And so I know what I like in a cozy mystery, and so that's what I try to bring to my books. And what I love and why I go back to the series, sure, you want a good mystery that you hopefully can't figure out until the very end, but you also come back for the characters and the community. Like, you want to go back, and by page 2, you've sank back into the town, and you love it, and you want to be there. You wish you lived there, and so that's what I want to create. And so you know when I was here, I'm saying like pre-COVID, before we all started to just be in our homes. But whenever I'd go to the grocery store, I'd see a couple people I knew. Walking downtown, you'd always see people you know. And so that's the kind of, when I set it up and I drew a little map for myself of the town and where it was, all the shop owners are on basically two, crossing streets in this little town, a few blocks. And a lot of them live in shops above their apartments. We do have a downtown here in Stores, Connecticut, that has that they built with shops and then with apartments above. Of course, we have a university across the street, so it's mostly college students and whatnot. So in my head, I built like the perfect, what I would love in a little cozy town. So I took from ours and then built from my imagination. So we've got the shops, we've got, the apartments, so that it's very easy for everybody to interact because they're there anyway. That's where they live, that's where they work. There's a park, that's where they play, that's where the town comes together. There's a town hall where in Curds of Prey there's a community dance. I wanted to show the community that even though, there's gossips and there's some grumpy people and there's, some people that you don't like, I wanted to show that they all come together for various reasons. And in each book, I kind of have some event where they come together. Sometimes it's more prominent, like in Curds of Prey. Sometimes less so, just maybe a farmer's market or something where they're all going to be at the park or in town hall or wherever. And so this way, little by little throughout the series, you meet some new people. I didn't want to throw in the whole town in book 1, and so as each book happens, the town grows in our own minds, and I always try to bring back those people, whether it's in a small way or in a larger way, so that people really feel like they're these are real people and they live off the page, and they're not just there for the one book for a plot point, that they're really in the town. And when you meet them and you see them and you fall in love with them in one book, you're going to see them again in another, and you're going to laugh and you're going to immediately know who they are because of some, funny thing, or how, their personality or whatever. And so I hope they're all distinct enough where in just, a sentence or two, or even by their name, people will remember who they are. And I also didn't want I love doing a series because I don't like when people are just one way. I try to make them, multi-dimensional, as in Lou. In this case, he owns Lou's Market. Well, his dad does, and he works there, and he's kind of the owner there. And so he runs it. And he's very grumpy Lou. That's how everybody knows him. And yet, there's more underneath everybody. And so I tried to show that throughout the series and not have them do a 180, because people are who they are, but just show a little bit more about them through different things that they do. So you get more of a more well-rounded of who every character is, and you kind of like them even if you don't like them.
Right.
You can empathize with them. You can say, oh yeah, I like that character. He annoys me, but I like him.
Absolutely. And, I love that for a reader too. There's almost that sense of, okay, we're coming home because maybe you read a standalone and you're immersed in a whole new world, all new characters, and you sort of crave the familiar. And you get that in a book like that. And I think that's why so many of us, we love Jessica Fletcher, but we love her best when she's in Cabot Cove versus everywhere else she travels. And this is not a spoiler to say, but I will say there's a dance in this book, and I really enjoyed it because everybody does the conga line, and anybody who knows me knows that like I live and breathe for Gloria Estefan. And so I then started thinking, if ever I write cozies, like I'm gonna like do riffs on her song titles and see if anybody ever notices, like Curds Get in the Way or like for Buddha. I don't know, so much potential there, but I think I'm
So much.
walking into your territory.
I love it. I should have talked to you before this book. Holy cow.
Well, if there's ever one, I'll be like, all right, there we go.
Absolutely.
But let me, just file that away.
That's right.
But let me ask you too. I'm actually going to attempt to combine a couple questions. It's always dangerous territory when I do that. But, there are 3 of these books out right now, but it sounds like book 4 is pretty much done. And I think you said that you're working on book 5. So let me ask you, as the series progresses, how do you endeavor to balance, backstory for new readers versus maintaining narrative momentum for those of us who come back book to book to book? And then what do you find becomes easier as the series progresses versus what becomes more difficult, 3 or 4 or 5 books in?
So yeah, well, I'm finding nothing easier. I thought, I really thought it would get easier, but I don't know about that. Yeah, balancing how much backstory to put in for a reader coming in at book 3 or, book 4 or any of the books, it is very difficult for me. Number one, because of course I know these characters, I know what I've written before, and my editor sometimes has to, I have a wonderful editor at St. Martin's, and sometimes she has to remind me, this might be their only, they might be coming in at this book. And so I have to, put bits and pieces, but I also, I've heard from readers who have read other books, and some people put the exact same language and the exact same paragraph. They just cut and
Right.
paste. And readers who read those books can't stand that. That really irks them, and yet in a way, you could easily just skim over that if you are a reader, but I try not to do that. But I do find myself sometimes, you will find the term French inspired to describe my shop in like every book. I just can't help it. I laugh at myself when I do. There are some phrases that I use again and again, and I laugh at myself, and I try to do something different, and I'm like, that's just how it's going right now. But I try to still put the relevant things in each book in the way that's organically natural. I've never tried to do a backstory dump in any
Right.
of the books, and especially the first one, you don't want to do that. And so so that's just how I do it. I do have to remind myself you know when it might be a good time, and I do try to kind of tease it out a little bit more actually than putting it in, so that for the readers who have been there a long time, they're not just, oh God, so, but that is difficult. And then, I mean, what I do find easier is that Willa does know these people now. The first one with her going in with, I didn't want the trope of she goes to her hometown. I wanted something new. And I liked the idea of her going someplace very new and starting off, and because of her backstory that worked for her, that she just wanted someplace completely new. And yet that, what I didn't think through until I got there, was that means she didn't know anybody. And so then she's getting to know them as the reader's getting to know them, which in some ways was good. And yet I love being able to, as I say, do the banter and have her have the relationships that she has, especially with her crew, Mrs. Schultz and Archie and Baz, and have already know them as the books go on. So in that way, that makes it easier. And I do even though it's hard to bring back people, I try not to, everybody has to serve a purpose for the plot, you know, in order to keep the pacing going. And I try not to just have something there to, oh, I haven't mentioned these people yet this book, let me have this scene. I don't do that. But I try to pull them in. If there's going to be someone else there for any reason, I'm going to pull in somebody that we've already seen and we already know, and people can say, oh yeah, there's that person again, you know. So as the town grows in my mind and in the reader's mind, because I've put more people there, it is getting more challenging for all those people to get in there. And yet at the same time, that's what I love most. That's what I love writing most, is all those different people and all those different personalities. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for me.
Sure. And I should just say, I actually came to book 3 as a new reader, and I found that it stood alone beautifully. So I applaud you for
Oh,
that, because I know that
thank
that's
you.
very hard to do. Because you have to sort of
Really hard.
entertain everybody's interests, and you don't know how readers are going to respond to that. But it stands alone very, very well.
Thank
Um,
you.
but I did want to ask you too, obviously these books are now being written very quickly, and it seems, I think, that what are you on, like a 2-book-a-year publication schedule? So that's a lot. I mean, I want to ask you what that experience has been like for you, because you get to sit with your first story, for a while, and then all of a sudden you're under contractual deadlines where you have to deliver, 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 and then deliver again. So can you talk about sort of adjusting to that new heightened publication schedule?
Yes, yeah, adjusting is the right word. Well, in my case, I did not get to sit with my first one. Cheddar Off Dead was from a proposal that I had to do in 3 weeks.
Oh my
And so, yeah, so I kind of went right into the fire at first. What happened was that I had a couple of books. I had gotten my agent with a book and it had gotten rejected. And instead of going to smaller publishers, we decided to shelve it and try another. And I tried another, and we were getting slowly back rejections, mostly because of the target audience or the theme. I got all good. Oh, we love her writing, blah, blah, blah. We love the mystery, blah, blah, blah. But, just not there. And then this opportunity came along. An editor at St. Martin said, I have an idea for a cheese shop mystery and I need a writer to write it. And so they asked my agent, they said, well, I'm asking some people. And so my agent said, do you want to throw your hat in the ring? Of course, I've said yes. And so she's like, well, how fast can you do it? I don't know who else, I have no idea who else is, going in for it. And of course, I didn't have anything. I had a couple short stories published. I had nothing. And so I was like, I could do it in 2 weeks. This is coming up. All we had was Cheese Shop Mystery, and the editor wanted it to be set somewhere in California. Those were my parameters. So this is coming up with the whole idea, writing a 5-page synopsis, the first 3 chapters, and then summaries for the next 2 books, because they were hoping it would be a series. 2 weeks. So because I was foolish and I was naive and I was green and really wanted it. And so I said, I can do it in 2 weeks. So I did it in 2 weeks. My agent got it and we worked on it a little for another week and then sent it in, and I got the contract for it. And so the first book, Cheddar Off Dead, was on contract, and it was April of 2020, which was when we were first in lockdown for COVID. So all of that was at once. And so the pressure of that was worse than anything since. So, the pressure of doing that proposal was something else. I mean, I think I slept 4 hours in 3 weeks. And so of trying to, come up with that. And then the first book, I had 8 months to do it. Now, previously, of course, the first book that I wrote that I got my agent from, that took years and years to write. The second book that I had handed in that ended up not going anywhere, I took 10 months to write because I knew my agent was kind of waiting. It was my self-imposed deadline. So I'd never done one in 8 months. And, I saw my name, on a Macmillan publishing contract. And I thought to myself, they're trusting me, who all they've seen are a few pieces of paper of that I could do this. Like, it was like, can I do this, but I have to do it. This has been my dream my whole life. I was at the time I was 53 years old, so I was like, okay, I need to do this. So so the pressure actually has gotten less,
Right.
and as I've kind of been learning how to do it, although there is so much pressure. I wrote the first two books before the first one even came out, and because they had a schedule already in place.
Right.
And so I didn't know the feedback. And so when I started book three, the first book's feedback was starting to come in, and I thought, I hope people like it, because it's kind of too late. It's
Right.
and, if people don't like this character or that for whatever reason, like I've already written book two, it's already in the can. I'm already starting book three. There's not much I can do about it. I think that was a good thing, because there was no noise. I was just for me.
Right.
And so as it continues on, and I do hear from readers, and thank goodness, I've gotten such positive feedback, and people love what I love. And I think it's because, again, I've been a cozy reader for so long, and I know what I love. I just, selfishly, I write for me, kind of, and because we all love similar things for a cozy. And so that's why I do it with that. Now, I got another 3-book contract for last summer. So far I have up till 6 books. And I feel more pressure because people do love it. Like this Curds of Prey, people have been saying, oh, it's my favorite one so far. And I think, oh, I love to hear that, but I don't want that one to be their favorite. I want the next one to be their favorite too, And so for me, it's like that's the pressure now that I'm hearing back from readers, is to keep that level of not disappointing. Everybody, especially if they have a long running series, eventually there's one that people are like, wasn't my favorite of the bunch, and I don't want, I just don't want that to happen to me. I just want, everybody to be like, oh, this one was my favorite, and then this one was my favorite, but it's gonna, I don't know. It's a lot of pressure in that way. And as far as writing them in a short amount of time, that is always difficult. I always end up going right up to it. This last one, because of some personal things that happened in my life, I had to take a little time off. And also because the contract for it didn't come for a couple months, and then they wanted to keep the schedule. So I had less time to begin with, and then something happened and I had even less time. So I wrote book 4 in about 4.5 months, which I never, if you asked me if I could write a book, even now I'd say, no, I can't write this one because I don't know that I could, but I do what I have to do, and I always I'm not one of those writers who can like write in the car if I have a few minutes or whatever. I need like concentrated time. And so sometimes it's a good thing when I know I got to work for 12 hours because it's a concentrated time. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, at least in your case, I guess there's sort of the immersion factor where you're never really out of the stories or the characters because it's just one
yes, because
done, and
it's
now I have
one
to
after
start the
the
next
other.
one.
Right. Although I do get them sometimes confused when I do interviews about which book is which, or like sometimes I'll forget
Right.
what's happened. But other than that, yes, I'm totally into it. And especially because a lot of times well, always I'm starting the next book, and then I'll get like editor revisions, and I'll
Right.
have to go back, and then I'll get copy edits where I have to read it over very carefully. So I'm constantly in the last book as I'm doing. And that's actually, even though scheduling wise it's horrid, it's actually helpful because I'm very into the book again, and I remember little things like, oh, that's right, I wanted to take that little piece and keep that thread to the next book. So that is helpful for me to do that.
Right. Right. Um, And I wanted to ask you too, I have to ask you, this is going to sound silly, but I mean, I love cheese. I think I live for cheese. If ever I had to pick one thing that I couldn't exist without, it probably would be cheese. And I used to joke that if I ever wrote a memoir, it would be called something ridiculous, like Just Add Cheese. But let me ask you, what is your relationship with cheese? And have you found that that's changed since, it's now the basis not only for your books, but for Willa's business? So now it's like a pleasure thing that has also become a work thing.
Yes, my relationship with cheese is very, very close, John. Um, it's very much like Willa as far as how much she loves it. When I started this series, I was just your normal, I love cheese eater, but I was like a grocery store cheese eater. I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't have a wide variety of cheeses. I was just normal cheese. But as I researched the book, um, I just fell in love with everything about cheese. And now Middletown, Connecticut has a place called Spread Cheese Co. There's actually there's, I don't know, 8 or 10 cheese shops in Connecticut, which I never knew. And so if anybody who lives anywhere, go on the internet. You might not even know. They're very small. They're kind of quiet. You might not even know there's a cheese shop nearby. And boy, what a difference that made. When I discovered the actual artisan cheese shop, and the different types of cheeses and how fresh they are. It's like going to a farmer's market as opposed to the grocery store as far as if you had produce, like the taste,
Right.
and that's what a cheese shop can do for you as far as fresh, small batch cheeses are delicious. And also they know what they're talking about. If you say, I like this type of cheese, or I like this about cheese, I don't like this, they'll give you, a taste of something that they think you like, and they're always on target. At least my cheesemonger is. And that just like went from, yeah, I love cheese, to, oh my God, cheese is my passion now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't need, I do love the accompaniments with cheese because sometimes it can make it taste completely different, but I don't need a cracker. Keep your crackers. I don't need a salad. I don't need anything with cheese in it. I can just have the cheese on its own. It's really and people ask me like what my favorite is. I couldn't possibly, because each one I have that I love, I mean, there are some that I don't love as much as others, but they're so different that
Mm.
I love them for different reasons, and so it's just, yeah. And also not just the taste of it. I really have such an appreciation now for cheesemakers and cheesemongers, especially. A cheesemonger is a cheese expert. I love that name. I love
That's
saying
great.
cheesemonger. And it was somebody who said everybody ought to use, was it you? It was somebody who said everybody ought to use that term, monger, for being an expert of something. That's a fabulous term. But they, just like reading the history of cheese and how it's made and aged, and there's so many different ways and everything that goes into the flavor of cheese. I mean, from the grass that the cows graze on and what season it is, it all matters. And so I, I have just such an appreciation for that, and it's so fascinating for me. I mean, it's really hard because when I research cheese, it's usually when I've already written the book. I've already got like draft one, possibly draft two done. And I just put like, I just write like in capital letters, cheese, put cheese here, cheese. So I know where I'm going to put it in, or where I'm going to put where she makes something. Um, and yet I don't want to stop the momentum of the story
Right.
in my head for doing the research, because I get in a lot of trouble. I go down the hole with the research. And so now, I go to my cheese shop, the owners, Jamie and Lindsay, and I go to my cheesemonger, Nina, and I ask them for some advice about cheese. I usually know the cheese that I want, but now that I've gotten to know them more and they've been so great, they've been so helpful with giving me other cheeses and whatnot that I don't even know exist. And so that's been helpful. And you guys will, more and more as the books go on, you'll be finding more like fun cheeses, but cheeses that you can get, that you can order, and if you want to
Right.
try them. And so I see why cheesemakers and cheese shop owners and cheesemongers have such a passion for cheese, because it's fascinating and wonderful and delicious.
It really
Lots of
is. It's
love.
an art. Like,
Yeah.
and Thank God you're writing these books, because if I was, I think it would explode. Like sometimes I can't stop myself. It's ridiculous.
It's
Um,
hard.
it really is. But just a few more questions for you, and then I'll let you get back to all those books you need to write. But I did quickly just want to touch on the idea of the cozy, because I think a lot of times people underestimate them, and they can be very hard to write because they're murder mysteries, but also, there's this whole series of, expectations, conventions, restrictions, really, because even though it's a murder mystery, you can't necessarily have, explicit violence, language, sex, sort of all of that has to take place, off the page and is sort of an implication rather than something we see explicitly. So can you talk about, what appeals to you about the cozy? And then, how do you sort of have to challenge yourself to creatively circumvent the confines that could be restricting if you allowed them to be?
Yeah. Yes, a cozy. I don't find it too difficult because I just see it as we're solving a puzzle here. I see it as the puzzle of it and the solving of it, and the murder, as you say, takes place off. It's she just sees it. I never, even in book 4, I had Case of the Blues. There's the scene where I actually had written it because Willa was there where she died, and I just thought, oh, nobody wants to experience that. And so I ended up, rewriting it so that she left and she comes back, a few minutes later, and it's happened already. And for me, especially this time in my life and after COVID, I just want cozy, and so I don't find it too hard to not do all of the violence and anything explicit, because again, that's what I don't want to read, and so I don't find it too difficult. But you know in some cases, I do sometimes wonder, because it's kind of hard to makes the stakes high without that, and then also to make it believable that she doesn't, you don't want to throw her into a stupid situation just to have some kind of conflict happen because you can't have the violence. So I guess in a way I do really consider that, but it's never not a consideration. So I guess that's why I'm saying it's not difficult, but I do, like, now that I'm talking about it, I do, that is always a consideration for me. And I think I just, find a way, because that's, you have to deliver what the reader is expecting. There's not, I've seen a lot, I watch a lot of my blogger friends, and who've become my friends now, that I love to see and watch their interviews, and sometimes, or their reviews of books, and sometimes they don't like a book because it's not cozy enough, or it doesn't have cozy elements, and that would be a disappointment to the reader. It's the last thing I want to do, is disappoint readers. And so I just find a way.
Sure. I guess you have no other choice. But it's funny because
Yeah.
sometimes people look down on the cozy as less than, and it's like, no, you have to sort of achieve more with less, and it's really, really difficult to do. I should say, the pitchfork in this book is very tastefully done.
Oh, thanks. Well, that was one of my readers, wrote to me. It was like a pitchfork. And I was like, oh no, is that too much?
It was fitting with the circumstances. You'll have to read the book and see that for yourself, but it's
Yeah.
true. All
Yeah.
right. Just a few more questions and then I really will let you go. But I did want to ask you, about your influences. I know that, you grew up with Nancy Drew. She was sort of my first love. Agatha Christie as well. And then for me, it was also Mary Higgins Clark. So that was sort of like my trifecta. But I'm wondering if you can talk about your reading life and how that has informed your writing life. Because you said that you'd always sort of immersed yourself in those worlds. And so when you started writing books, you had a very clear idea of what you wanted to accomplish.
Yes, it was funny when when I first started writing, I was in my 20s. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was going to write a Nancy Drew type book, because even though I had, progressed since then, that was, she was so influential on me, and I wanted people to feel the way I felt when I read her books. So I wrote these Hillary Jones books, and that was back way before the internet, when I would just, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I would just write a book, I'd put it in their box and I'd send it off. And these were the days you could just send it off to big publishers, And by the time I got it back saying, with a rejection, I'd already have most of a second book done, and I'd read it and I'd see how horrible it was. But that's what I was doing. I was just like writing entire books and sending them off, awful books and sending them off, but I eventually learned how to write with that. So, and then I stuck with that, with a teenage protagonist for way longer than I should have, because by then that was more middle grade, YA, exploded into something much, much deeper and more and older. And I was still kind of in that, I hadn't been a teenager for a while, so I was still kind of in that mode. And so when finally I got a very nice rejection about the book, but it said, I don't something to the effect of, you're not really on par with where teenagers are today. I thought, well, of course I'm not. By then I was like in my early 30s, I think. And I thought, no, she's right. Why am I still trying to do? And I was reading cozies by then. And I don't know why I didn't make the switch to, this is what I want to write. And it was a while. Well, we brought our son home, and so I was like involved with family. So then writing kind of was on the side for me for a long time. So it took a while for me to make the switch of, well, let me do this. Let me just do what I know. And so that was the book that ended up getting me my agent, the cozy, about a mom blogger, because that's what I knew. I was getting paid to write like Irma Bombeck type articles for Patch, an online newspaper. And I was doing that like every other week for about 2 years, writing these small humorous essays. And so I did that in a cozy, and that's when I finally started, realizing, okay, this is my thing. This is what I know now, and I can do it. So yeah, but I was always, like you said, I was always reading, and I don't know why it took me so long to make the switch of, why aren't I writing this? But life gets in the way.
I was gonna say, we're always the last to
Yeah.
know. It's so
Right.
obvious in hindsight.
Yeah, it was.
All right, so final 2 questions, and this one might actually in some ways relate to the last question, but people are always looking, for some guidance for people who've achieved some level of success. So I want to ask you, in reflecting on a writing life, or more generally a creative life, what do you think is the best advice that you were ever given? And then the flip side to that, the best advice that you were never given and had to learn for yourself just throughout the process of actually doing all of this work?
Well, the best advice I was given, like I said, since I've been doing this so long, I've I absorbed a lot of advice, and I don't, it kind of feels like that's just what I do now. So I don't know in particular where I got it, but more recently it was done is better than good. And that just means that, just get it on the page, because in your head, it's always going to be better. And I don't think writer's block exists. I think we are, it's not because we don't have an idea or we don't know what to write. It's because we're afraid to write it. We're afraid that once it has to form into words on a page, that it's not going to be this wonderful thing that is mostly a feeling. And it's very hard to put that feeling on a page. That's why it takes so long to write a book, because it's not about the words, it's about the feeling that those words evoke. And so that was the best. That helped me to actually get books done, because that was a more recent piece of advice, and that I just had to do. I stopped procrastinating and just do it. And then I realized, wow, any words are better than no words, even if they're bad. I always say my first draft looks like a first grade primer. It's like a see Jane run. It's like, it's nothing. It's just words on the page, but it moves the story, and it tells the story, and it lets me know that the story holds together. And then I go back and because for me, writing is not easy. With some people it is, but for me, the actual writing isn't. The story is. I enjoy that part. I want to be like James Patterson and give everybody else ideas and let them write it. But I'm not. So I have to do it myself. The best advice I was never given as far as creativity, you say, definitely make it a priority. Like the difference between me not getting published in the 30 years before and me getting published in a few years, when I finally decided this is what I was going to do, I got an agent in 2 years and published in 4, was that the priority factor, that I stopped saying, this is a dream, this is my, oh, wouldn't this be great? And I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it. And I had a 5-year plan. I had my own reasons, and financial incentives can be a good reason too. But I had different, I had just turned 50, and my marriage of 25 years was just over. And all of a sudden it wasn't like this lifelong dream that you think you have your whole lifetime to achieve. All of a sudden it's like, okay, stop making it a dream and make it a priority for once, and it's risky. And I still don't know, I mean, my son was still younger then when I had started it. And so I had to work around that, but I found a way. And I never thought, when something's a dream, you feel like you don't deserve to sacrifice other things sometimes for it. At least for me, I didn't, and that I shouldn't. And if it's really what you want, I'm not saying that people who it's their dream aren't working hard. And I'm sure, there's a lot of people get up at 5:30 before their kids get up and all of that. They're working hard, but just take that extra step. It's almost like saying, oh, I dream of going to Fiji one day, or I'm going to go to Fiji next year. Like, think of how you would think about those two things differently. You would do different things if you say, I'm going to make this happen and I have this timeline and this is when it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I'm going to pivot and do this, or I'm going to invest in myself and do this, rather than, gee, wouldn't it be nice? This would be great if this happened, because it can happen. We're regular people. I looked up to authors so much when I was younger that I never really truly believed that it could be me. Even as I was sending out those books, it was still so, I always say Wizard of Oz-ish, publication was the man behind that curtain. And I was Dorothy, like scared and like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to try, and so you kind of have to change that mindset to being like, what the heck, I'm just going to do it.
I love that. That gives me hope, and I think a lot of people will appreciate that perspective. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe you are the dreamer, and the dreamer, I guess, eventually has to become the doer. That's good advice. And all right, final question. And I always feel terrible asking this because, everybody works so hard on their books and we read it really, really quickly. And then we're like, okay, well, now we're going to twiddle our thumbs until the next one comes out.
Oh,
Fortunately, in your case, it's very, very quick. I mean, but I do have to ask you, book 4 is on the way. It'll be here before we know it. Case of Blue. So what can you tell us about that book?
Yes, I love it. And I don't mind asking at all. I love the next one coming. So Case of the Blues, of course, revolves around a very valuable and much sought after blue cheese. And so, of course, and so this involves Willa's old colleagues from the last job she had who come into town, and her former boss, who is now deceased. And he was the one who created this blue cheese, but it's very mysterious. He wouldn't share where it's made or aged with anyone. He wouldn't share how it's made. And so it's got all these secrets attached to it, and who inherits those secrets, and how that involves a murder, and then how Willa and Team Cheese are involved, all comes into play. And this one I'm very excited about because it's a little bit different. Because it's book 4, I just thought, as I said, I've been writing the ones well before, the other ones come out. So I was thinking, maybe people want something a little bit different. So this one has some riddles in it that like the reader can solve along with Willa and Team Cheese if they want to. And so you not only are you trying to solve the murder with Willa, but you're also trying to figure out where this blue cheese is aged and all this mysterious stuff about it. So I'm excited about Case of the Blues.
That's awesome. That sounds like a fun little interactive element.
Yes.
All right, well, Korina Moss, thank you so much. And for readers at home, in case you missed it, Curds of Prey is available right now. You got to go get it. Thank you, Korina.
Thank you, John.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.